Hey, how's it going? And today I wanted to do a quick video on how to do a proper S-Log exposure with the Sony A7 III. I actually just got this camera. I got rid of my A7S and I was looking for a good still camera, but this camera also shoots basic video. So I thought it'd be fun just to show you how you can shoot high definition or 4K video with this. Nothing too fancy, but I wanted to give you my thoughts about this camera in case you're thinking about getting it. The one reason I got it is it's on sale right now. It says June 2024 and I saw they dropped the price $500, so it was $1,200 for the camera. As a still camera, it is a fantastic camera. As a video camera, I would say it's just good for what you see is what you get footage. I really wouldn't use it for shooting log footage, although you can shoot log footage, and I'm going to show you actually how to get an exposure for log footage, but then I'm going to show you how to get an exposure in one of the Cine modes instead. So I think you could shoot with Cine 2 and get something that looks pretty good. A lot of it has to do with you yourself as far as how you set up scenes and lights and stuff like that. The camera is maybe only 20% of it. I've got a basic little scene set up here, and I'm actually shooting this, filming this with a Canon XA11, so I haven't used this before, so I'm curious to see how this turns out. I've seen some tutorials online already, and I think there's some confusion about something. I've seen people using like ND filters inside an interior location. One person I saw, they're shooting an S-Log and then they overexposed by 2 stops. I don't think they got a proper exposure, and so the whole scene looks blown out. And so then they turn around and put an ND filter on, which then nullifies the overexposure that they just got. I think a lot of people get confused about exposure. If you think about it simply in terms of signal to noise, that might help you, and to think that there's really no difference between signal and noise between audio and video. So in this case, I'm inside in a kitchen at night and I've got the lights on. I know already that I'm going to be lacking light for this situation. So I'm going to have to, normally I would bring in more lights, but in this case, because I'm being lazy, I'm just going to increase the ISO to get a proper exposure. What we're going to do is, there's actually a book, I don't know if you can see this cover too well, but this is a fantastic book. It's on the Sony FS7, and on the back of this, it gives the readouts for proper exposure for S-Log2 and S-Log3. So what we do is we expose to 90% white on a 90% white card. And then we expose about, I think it's either a stop and a half or 2 stops above what Sony recommends. And that gives us a good exposure for S-Log2. We don't use the multimeter for that. I think you're going to get a wrong exposure if you use the multimeter. So anyway, what I've got is I've got this basic scene. My camera just died there. I've just got these 3 objects in this scene, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 90% white card in front of the scene here. One tip I have is that when you're assigning your custom buttons, you can assign one just to the menu itself, and it'll go back to the page you were last on. So I've assigned this button to my menu, so when I'm first starting with this camera and I click on it, it takes me to the custom key page, and I can go into that page to see how I assigned my buttons. Because when I'm first starting, I can't remember even which button does what. So you'll notice on button number 4, I've assigned it to my zebra display. And in the menu, what I've done, I believe it's on page camera 2, page 6-9, you can come down here and set your zebras to 75. So if you set your zebra level for 75, then when you look for zebras in your scene and you see the zebras on your primary target, what you're exposing for your primary subject, then you know your subject is properly exposed. The subject should not be blown out. Other things in the scene may blow out, but you should handle those on a case-by-case basis. You wouldn't handle that by putting an ND filter on your camera. You would deal with those highlights individual. So if you have a light in your scene that's blowing out once you've got your proper exposure, then you need to turn that light down or put a shade on it or scrim it or filter it or get rid of it. You do highlight management on a case-by-case basis once you've got your primary subject properly exposed. But do not put an ND filter on inside. I saw this person saying that, you know, ND filters are like sunglasses for your camera, and that's exactly right, but you don't wear sunglasses inside your house. So that was all I could think of. So anyway, we got our zebra set here, and if I get out of that and I come back here, it looks like button 4 is going to be my zebras, you'll see right away. Now normally I'm in S-Log2 right now. That's picture profile 7. I'm at 1/60th shutter speed. I'm wide open right now. The multimeter is flashing overexposed and by about 2 stops, and that would be correct actually. But if you'll notice, as I adjust the ISO, and normally what I would do is I wouldn't bump up the ISO, I would bring in more lights if I was underexposed. But what I can do is when I go into ISO, you'll notice as I bring the ISO down, you see how I'm losing my zebras? So normally what I would do if I was underexposed is I would get a faster lens or I would bring in more lights. But I'm being lazy, so I'm just bumping up the ISO. But normally I wouldn't bump up the ISO like that. Okay, so now we're properly exposed, believe it or not. Now the zebras are getting on my nerves now. So what I can do is go to button 4 and then just turn them off. So that's how you get a proper exposure, is you use your zebras, and you set it to 75, but you need a 90% white card. And that's how you get a proper exposure. So this scene now, here, these objects, they're out of focus of course, but if I press this one as my focus in, I think I can come down here. This scene, you notice, is now properly exposed. Now I want to show you something. It's possible here on that bottle, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but I see the light above me is making a hot spot. So what I would do for that, if I had time, is I would put a filter over that light or something, or maybe even just turn the bottle or something to manage that highlight on an individual basis. You know, whatever I got to do to manage that one highlight. I might put just one thing right there, even hold my hand there, just to cover that highlight. You see that? So you have to manage your highlights on a case-by-case basis. But that is a properly exposed scene. Now I'll go ahead, I don't know if my white balance is set right, but I'll go ahead and record this and see what it looks like. And then I'll post that up. Okay, I don't need to film it for that long. Okay, there's that. So now I wanted to show you, just because we have S-Log, I really think it's a mismatch for this camera, because it's almost like having a Ferrari in New York City, because you have something that has a lot of potential, but because you're in New York City and there's cops everywhere and there's speed limits everywhere, you can't really drive the car to its full potential. So this particular camera, even though it has S-Log, may not want to film in S-Log just because it's highly likely that it'll break down in post, because it's only 8-bit. So 8-bit only gives you 256 colors, whereas if you were filming with a camera that could do 10-bit, that's 1024 colors versus 256. So S-Log 2 and 3 are meant and designed to be graded. They're meant to have a lead applied and to be graded. And when you go through that process on 8-bit, it just doesn't hold up very well. So that doesn't mean that you can't use this camera and film documentaries and get some amazing footage, but it just means you don't use S-Log. That's all. It's a feature that is there, and maybe they just put it in because it's a Sony camera, but you probably be better served to just shoot in Cine 1 or 2 or one of the Hypergammas. But how you get exposure with those is completely different from S-Log. So I'll show you that. On this camera, what I have my picture profile set to C3. So I'm not sure which one it is. Let me see. Cine 1, that's so PP5 is Cine 1, that's good enough. And notice the color space is Cinema, which is a smaller color space. And what you can actually do is come in here and change that, I believe, to S-Gamut. They actually have S-Gamut Cine. That's a wider color space, so you could go ahead and go with that gamma curve, but then choose a wider color space like S-Gamut. So I'm going to set this in the color mode of S-Gamut because it's a wider color space. I'll leave it on the gamma curve of Cine 1, which is the same as a Hypergamma and very similar to Hypergamma. And how you expose for a Hypergamma is completely different from S-Log. So here you don't want to overexpose Hypergammas. So what you want to do for that, you can actually use the multimeter for that. So what you do is you get the 18% gray card, the other side, you put your camera on spot metering, and then you can just adjust your exposure. So here, Well, I'm on ISO 3200. I can come way down. So let me bring my ISO. This is why I say you're going to be in a better position. Let me just go down to the native ISO at 800 then. See, you see I'm one stop almost under. So I can just come up. Let me just come up a little bit then on the ISO here. I'm a third of a stop under. That's fine with that's actually perfectly fine. Let me come out of this. And well, we know right here with that on the center of my screen, I know actually it may not look like it from the scene, but I am actually properly exposed. This is what you see is what you get. So you don't need to do the gamma assist display. You don't need to do anything. You can just get the footage, and as you see it is how it's going to be. And you can still lightly grade this. You can maybe add some contrast on it or something like this, but this is the way to go. This really is. And I'll render this out too. And then we'll compare them and see how they look. Wait a sec. This says PP7. That can't be right. Hold on. Why does it say PP7? I thought I changed the picture profile. Did I mess up? Let me double check here. I did not change my picture profile. Okay, so I just showed you how not to get a proper exposure, see? Okay, what is this one? Oh, you've got to go sideways. Cine 1 S gamut. Okay, didn't I select that? It's on record, hold on. Let me double check. Picture profile, okay. Okay, this looks right now. Okay, so I'm sorry about that, but that's what happens. Okay, let me put this back here now. And let's see. Now that's picture 5 profile, so let me escape. PP5, okay. So now it's showing a third stop under, okay. So that looks right. Okay, so let me pull this out here. There we go. Okay, that looks correct now. That looks correct. Before it looked underexposed. Yeah, if you try to use the multimeter with S-Log, it's not going to work. This is how I just showed you. Use the 18% gray card. I put it on spot metering. Then you can use the multimeter here. And it's okay to be underexposed the hypergammas a little bit by a third of a stop. That looks like more than a, yeah, so that's fine. Yep, so this is a perfectly good exposure. So let me film this one then. Okay, and I can tell you from experience that shooting with S-Log 2 and 3 is a lot more challenging because you do have to get zebras and it's a lot more hit and miss, whereas with the Cines, the Cine 1 and 2, it's going to be a lot more consistent. So anyway, that's actually all I had for today. I hope you found this helpful. Take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.